Hello Internet, and welcome to my video on Heart of Iron 4, The New Order. This is the second video of a 4-part series where we will discuss all the nations in the former Soviet Union. This video also contains spoilers for the first 2 to 3 years of the game, so stop watching now if you don't want any spoilers. Before we begin, here is a message from my co-hosts. The Western Siberia sector lies on the east of the Ural Mountains and west of the Central Siberian Republic. They are also the victim of bombing raids, but the presence of the free aviators reduces the effect somewhat. Still, in the early game, it is nearly impossible to build anything outside of national focuses. Like the first video, we start in the far north, where we have Vorkuta. Vorkuta is a frigid wasteland state dotted with hundreds of gulags, as shown by the national spirit here. During the early Soviet era, political enemies were sent here for cheap labor, mostly to mine coal. In the years leading up to Operation Suvorov, Marshal Clement Voroshilov tasked Vasily Blokhin with procuring resources for the invasion. But when Soviet authority collapsed, Blokhin reorganized it into his own fiefdom. He granted amnesty to the less troublesome prisoners and conscripted the local population to work for him. The leader of Vorkuta is Vasily Blokhin. In real life, he was the one behind the Katyn massacre, as well as other various unexplained disappearances. Really not much to talk about here. His generals are also relatively low ranked and not too good. The only thing you need to mind is the climate. You will be fighting over frigid terrain, so keep that in mind. You should instead lure them into your land like when you're fighting Komi, and then encircle them. If you win against them, you will obtain the largest oil reserve in the sector. This would be essential for your motorized division. It also produces coal in large volumes, but that's not an in-game resource. South of Vorkuta are the territories of Yugra and the Free Aviators clique. Now here's the thing about Vorkuta. The guards are undermanned and they often rely on Central Military Command to suppress their prisoners. When Central Command collapsed, the prisoners did the natural thing and escaped. They then went south and terrorized a wide stretch of land from the Kara Sea to the Ural Mountains. Their leader is the mafia boss Jaba Yoseliani. He is the leader of an organized crime syndicate called the Vori Vizakon, a mafia organization dating back to Lenin's era. Along with his inner circle, he became the leader of Yugra and expanded their activities beyond banditry and looting. Their leaders are better than their Vorkuta handlers, but with a tiny industrial base, it is unlikely for them to survive a prolonged war. Here's what I mean by tiny. They only have 4 factory slots in total. There's 2 in Yugorsk, their capital, which also has some oil and iron. There is 1 in Saranpaul, a region with the second most resources but also the smallest population in the entire sector. There's another one in Yagan, containing some more oil and aluminum. Here's a little fun fact. Yagan was established in 1965 as a logging camp and wasn't recognized as a town until years later, so this place shouldn't really exist yet. The last province, Salekar, has no slots at all, only a small aluminum deposit saves it from obscurity. Again, in the far north, not easy to build anything there. East of Yugra is Surgut, home of the Free Aviators, the only state in West Siberia who doesn't suffer from the Luftwaffe bombing. This is a nation of pilots and their crewmen, made for the sole purpose of giving the Luftwaffe a hard time. Their leader is Yevdokia Bersanskaya, an aviator ace who in our timeline led the 588 Night Bomber Regiment. In the game, he organized the remnants of the Red Air Force and claimed the territory of Surgut, using it to launch counter-raids against the Luftwaffe. Since their army is mostly pumped into the Air Force, they don't have any divisions, and there is only one general of repute, a local geologist named Nasmet bin Zumasnov. The province itself is a wasteland. It has some oil and aluminum, but all in all it's just a wasteland. Normally other unifiers can integrate them peacefully, but there is a very slight chance that they will decline. Further south we find the Zlatos and Sverdlovsk republics. Zlatos is a rather unique state. In the years leading to Operation Suvorov, most of the military factories were positioned in the Ural Mountains to hide them from the prying eyes of the Luftwaffe. When central authority collapsed, The factory workers rally to Yevgeny Dragunov, who declared a new Zlatos Republic. The only reason why they haven't collapsed yet is because they sell quality guns to all the other factions. Their leader is Yevgeny Dragunov. Well, actually, he's not the sole leader. He only leads the civil administration. The military is led by his friend, Mikhail Kalashnikov. It's an arrangement that actually works out pretty well for them. Their generals are decent enough, and they can potentially call in Yugra to help deal with any invading force. Since their territories are mountainous and likely fortified, this will lure them away from the mountains before attacking. Their provinces are very valuable in terms of industry and resources. Nizhny Tagil is a sparse urban state with about 1 million inhabitants. Zlatos is a developed rural state with 82 iron and 5 infrastructure, along with the only source of chrome in the sector until you take over the southern Urals. To the east of Zlatos lies the Republic of Sverdlovsk, initially a buffer state made by Cuman to fend off the bandits from Yugra, but then declared itself independent. However, they began to suffer from infiltrators from all sides, such as from Cuman and Omsk. This has had a detrimental effect to their army, and must be addressed before moving forward. Once fixed, you will be able to work on your army further. The leader of Sverdlovsk is the legendary Konstantin Rokossovsky, Marshal of the Third Army. When Operation Suvorov failed and the Germans counterattacked, his army took the brunt of it and were gutted, forcing him to seek refuge under Kaganovich. However, like Voroshilov, time is not on his side and he will need a successor. His selected candidate is the great strategist Pavel Batov, who helped Voroshilov and Tukhachevsky plan the early opening moves of Operation Suvorov. In our world, well, I consider him to be one of the most underrated generals in all of World War II. He was basically behind almost every great Soviet victory that you can name. That being said, some people are tired of military rule, and have rallied around Boris Yeltsin to push them into a democracy. He also advocates for a rapid shift into a capitalist economy. Whether or not it will succeed is a matter of how you plan it. The generals of Sverdlovsk are numerous and highly capable. Their army is quality-oriented, so training time would increase, but they would get a number of bonuses depending on who you choose to instruct them. Sverdlovsk owns two large provinces crossed by the Isset, Myat, and Tavda rivers. Sverdlovsk itself lies to the west. It is an urban zone containing oil, iron, and 2.2 million people. It is named Yekaterinburg now and is the fourth largest city in Russia. Meanwhile, to the east lies Khanty-Matsinsk, a remote wasteland with 14 oil and 4 infrastructure. This place also has some ski resorts open for most of the year, at least in our world. South of Sverdlovsk we find Cuman, Kaganovich's breakaway state. This state once controlled half of Siberia, but then central Siberia broke free and everything went downhill from there. Now they are left with a very tiny fraction of their territory, and they seek to snatch it back by any means, just like the West Russian Revolutionary Front. Their leader is Lazar Kaganovich, who rejected Bukharin's brand of communism and followed on Stalin's path. He was also involved in a power struggle with Bukharin, but lost and was exiled to Siberia. In case if you don't remember, in the game, Stalin died in 1920, but he still had some followers. Later on you will also need to enact your 5-year plan. Of course, you can also coup him and put this guy in power, but the devs haven't really finished content for him yet, so it may not be the best idea to do so. Their generals are almost as equally skilled as Sverdlovsk, and their army development will focus more on quantity. They also control the Ural automotive plant, giving them cheaper trucks, and Lenin's mausoleum. If another faction takes over, they could do other things with the site. All their states are well developed, being urban sectors with great industrial capacity in the game, as well as the real world. Cuman is a sparse urban zone with a small amount of oil well, but large untapped reserves lie beneath. Kurgan is another sparse urban zone with some aluminum, also containing most of the farmland. The major population center is Chelyabinsk, a dense urban zone with 1.4 million inhabitants. This city contains numerous steel mills, and is also a main rail hub for the Trans-Siberian Railway. Now we head slightly east to Omsk, the Black State. Ah, Omsk, where do I even begin? Natalia's comment describes them perfectly. This is a state fueled by hate, existing for the sole purpose of destroying Germany. These people are fanatics, They will destroy Germany with blatant disregard to collateral damage, to themselves and to the world. They are currently led by Dmitry Pokrass, but at this age he has grown frail, and to the rest of the generals he is nothing more than a puppet. He has arranged for Dmitry Liadov to take his place as a successor, but some people don't like this choice. They may launch an insurrection that we'll have to deal with. The generals in Omsk have trained well for the eventuality of the invasion, and later in the focus tree you can shape your army into the best one in the entire sector. They invested so much into their army that their lands are neglected. The state of Omsk itself is a dense urban zone, but the resources are meager. You will need to expand further if you want to sustain an army. Lastly, we head to the southern Urals, where a power struggle exists between the Ural League, Magnitogorsk, and Dirlewanger's brigade. Respectively, these guys are the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we'll start with the good, represented by the Ural League. Remember Vorkuta? It collapsed and most of the prisoners escaped to Yugra, but some of them didn't want to live with the thieves, so they marched across the Urals to their current position of Beloret. Many died during the march, but those who remained became the best soldiers anyone could ever attest to, and they established themselves as the Ural League, sentinels of the mountains. Naturally, this attracted a lot of people seeking protection, and now they have a refugee crisis on their hands. They are led by a Latvian priest named Yanis Mendrik, who led the long march from Vorkuta to Beloret. Despite being a Catholic priest, he took the position of mediator between mostly Orthodox refugees and was chosen as the leader of the group. They have 5 generals, including Ilya Starinov, the man who founded the Spetsnaz in our timeline. However, the army has a severe shortage of manpower. Every 50 days you will receive more men, but if that's still not enough, you should try to find other sources, like for instance those refugees that keep showing up on your borders. The Ural League controls 2 highly mountainous provinces, easy to defend once you have the manpower. Their capital is to the north in Beloret, which has a long history of metalworking. To the south lies Siberia, known for rich mineral reserves of copper, zinc, chrome, and iron. Next up is the bad, or should I say, the man. What we have in the east is a state of scientists conducting some dubious experiments, ranging from morally questionable at best and reprehensible at worst. It was said that during the late 1940s, Henry Yagoda, the NKVD chief, asked them to look for more exotic means of defeating the Germans. Their leader, Trofim Lysenko, took it as a carte blanche to do anything he wanted, and take my word for it, this guy is insane. No, this isn't just me explaining the game, this is an official assessment that came from another mad scientist. Yours truly, your host. Nearly everyone from my grandpa's extended family were wiped out because of his quack policies. If my grandpa didn't immigrate, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. Read about his theories and prepare for a headache. I won't explain them here. Anyway, there are 2 things you need to watch out for: your sanity and NKVD influence. If your sanity goes too deep into the critical, your stability and research speed will take a hit. If the NKVD becomes too influential, they may coup you. Unless of course if that's what you want. The NKVD has their own leader and their own focus tree, revolving around undoing Lysenko's mistakes. Magnitogorsk only has 3 leaders, all from the 22nd Motor Rifle Division. Since all your divisions are elite motorized units, their build mostly revolves around that. Your starting state is the 2nd best in the southern Urals, just beneath Orenburg. This state is a rural zone, with nearly 600,000 people. It also contains oil, tungsten, and iron. In the real-world timeline, Magnitogorsk once posed one of the largest iron deposits in Russia, but since the 1990s the deposit began to decline and the iron ore had to be imported from Kazakhstan. Lastly, we have the ugly, Dirlewanger's brigade. When I said that this video will be an overview of the Russian states, this one is an exception. This is technically a German state run by a group of rogue SS units. They live off the land of the few unlucky inhabitants they come across, leaving death and destruction everywhere they go. It's likely that the chaos in Kazakhstan to the south was caused by this single unit alone. Their leader is Oskar Dirlewanger. YouTube will take down this video if I talk about him in detail, so go ahead and do a quick Wikipedia search. Also, while you're at it, check their TV tropes page for a link to all his possible death events. Seems like the devs really hate him too. Next up is the generals. They only have 4 leaders, but their army and officers are also a factor. Take too much manpower, and your army will become disorganized. Disfavor the officers, and they will begin to lose loyalty. The best way to increase both is by looting, but there is also a concern on how you will distribute the loot. To the men, to the officers, all these have ramifications. Lastly, we'll talk about the state itself. Wagner has turned Orsk into an underdeveloped cesspit containing only small deposits of oil and iron. Reality is starkly different. Orsk has a gem mine, a thriving artisan industry to rival Orenburg, and a machine-building industry. The people there are also prosperous. Here, 50,000 jobs were lost during the 1990s, but they have mostly recovered. With that, we are done with this sector. I hope you all find my video helpful in making a first choice. I'll see you next time on part 3, Central Siberia. Until then, thanks for watching.